Hi there. Welcome back. I'm Sean Osterlink, and this is Overcoming with ACT. Thank you for joining me in my office again and my whiteboard that seems so very large next to me and yet so small on the screen, or at least the words on this whiteboard seem too small. What I have for you today are a couple things here. I've got what is called the ACT Hexaflex in the corner here. This is a hexagon. It was developed by, I think, Stephen Hayes. He is the developer of ACT, or the main guy who came up with ACT. I think there's a few people that were involved and wrote the first book on that stuff. But what this hexagon describes is the six elements of ACT that I work with people on. Some of these more overtly, and some are more just subtly worked in the process of treatment. But I'll briefly explain what is going on here. We've got acceptance, and what acceptance means in ACT, and I think I might have described this in another video, is the willingness to experience the unpleasant. It means being willing to open up to unpleasant internal experiences predominantly, to allow the mind to have a thought, to allow the mind to have a pain, an emotional hurt, something unpleasant that can be showing up. And rather than taking a stance of trying to get rid of it, or taking a stance to opening up, accepting, allowing it to be there. Okay? Some of these other things help with that acceptance stance. So there's cognitive diffusion. So another video I talked about fusion, and fusion is getting all caught up with something. Maybe it's a thought that popped into your mind. Maybe it's an emotional pain that's showing up. Maybe it's a struggle to deal with emotional hurts, and maybe you tend to push these things away, and so something is showing up there, and so it's drawing your attention into it. It's getting you roped in. It's getting you hooked. I often call fusion being hooked. I didn't come up with that term, but that's a term that I like to use for that one. Yeah. There's of the many terms for fusion that one can use. I like the imagery of the cloud with a hook coming from it. If you're my client, you may see me draw this sometime. But anyway, what diffusion is learning to unhook from those things. It's learning skills that will help you take a more passive response to internal experiences and to the mind and to the emotions, to step back from those things and get some distance and treat them in a different way. This is viewed as a metacognitive sort of treatment. So in classic CBT, classic cognitive behavioral therapy, you learn to debate your thoughts, argue with them, practice positive self-talk, try to challenge things that are not true. And those can certainly be useful tools, and I'm sure I'll talk about them in some videos. And I work with clients on that stuff too, because that absolutely has a place. CBT is well regarded, and of course, changing the way that you talk to yourself and how you think about things are helpful tools. But what ACT does is ACT comes in to help where, what if that's not working for you? What if that kind of strategy just results in getting pulled even more into your thoughts, even more into your head, where you're stuck playing whack-a-mole with negative sort of thoughts, with experiences. You're just trying to get rid of them, or you're just trying to like pull yourself up and be hopeful in what seems like a hopeless situation or something like that. And all the best rationalizing in the world to be more positive just doesn't seem to be working, and that's where ACT really comes in to help. And so, okay, that's a cognitive diffusion. Then we've got, when I jump up here, and I'm really going to combine these, there's present moment awareness, and there's what's called self as context, or the observing self. And what these really mean, they really get combined in my mind, is that this has to do with mindfulness. In fact, diffusion, focusing on the present moment, and this observing self stance all come together in mindfulness activities. And so, and we're going to talk about this as I get down to some tools here and application, but really it's this stance of I'm defusing, I'm unhooking, I'm stepping back from whatever's showing up in my body. Then the present moment is, how do I engage with what's happening right here, right now? I want to come into the here and now. I want to come into what is physically around me. What can I see, hear, smell, taste, touch, what am I feeling, and connect with those elements. And the observing self down here, what's called self as context, means taking this stance where I wrote down here, getting curious like a scientist. And so it's like a curious scientist stance where you're observing what's happening, maybe internally within your body, or it could be in your environment. And rather than judging it, rather than being critical or negative or caught up on how bad it is, if there's a trigger happening, instead taking this curious stance where this is no longer a threat to me. This doesn't represent danger to my system. I'm taking a different approach to it, and I'm grounding myself in the present moment as I do that. And then what values are, again, I think I hit on this in another video, is values are the things that matter to us. Values is how we want to show up in the world, who we want to be, what matters to us, what is important to us. And then there's different ways that we can act those things out, so connecting with that. And then the last piece is committed action. And what that means is really, what am I going to do about it then? What do I want to do behaviorally, action-wise? That might be an internal action that's within the mind of something I'm going to do different. I'm behaving as far as mental behavior, or it could be external physical behavior. That's really setting, that could be setting particular goals. That could be planning exposure exercises to do things that are hard or challenging. And so that's committed action. So what am I going to do about it? Okay, so that's the ACT Hexaflex. And the purpose of all of these coming together is that you would experience more what they call as psychological flexibility. I don't know if that needs air quotes, but what that flexibility means is to respond to the things of life, the stresses of life, the difficult things that show up in the body in response to the stresses of life, with more of a sense of flexibility, fluidity, whatever. You're more bendable. You feel more like Gumby in response to the hard things of life, rather than getting caught up in rigid modes of responses or rigid coping strategies that end up actually hurting you more. They end up backlashing in some way. That you're able to weather the storms of life using these tools and then respond to them in ways that are consistent with how you want to show up to the world, rather than doing things that are inconsistent with that. I should talk about that in another video. But if I want to show up to the world in a way that's, let's say, courageous, and then some sort of stressor thing shows up, maybe there's something that happens that's scary, and I act in a less than courageous way, maybe I act in a cowardly kind of way, and then that doesn't fit with my values. It's not how I wanted to show up in hypothetical situation of scariness. Then that would be living inconsistently. I use my hands to demonstrate this. It's like, this is me living consistently. Who I strive to be and how I'm living my life are parallel with one another. And most of us, any of us in life to some degree, are probably askew from that. So how far out of line am I with my values, with who I want to be, with who I think that I want to be, what I claim that I want to be? If I say this is something important to me, if I believe this is something important to me, do my actions actually demonstrate that? Is it actually how I'm living out my life? If not, then I need to work on that. So now we're going to work through an example here. And the trigger example I thought of is criticism from a boss or coworker. Let's say boss. Let's say you're I don't know, your quarterly review came up or something like that. I was just watching Severance, so there we go. That's something that comes up, and hey, that's a fun show. And so, okay, you're getting criticism from a boss, and a lot of people um, don't really like getting criticized. Don't like getting criticized. Who likes getting criticized? And this can be something triggering, right? This can bring up a fear response. This can bring up anxiety. What's going to happen? Am I gonna get in trouble? Is this going to negatively impact my job in some way? Just to be approached with negativity, that there's something wrong with me, that there's something less than about me, there's something um, bad that's being pointed out about me. Like, that doesn't feel good. That's triggering for a lot of people. Okay, so there's our trigger there. Getting criticism from your boss, from someone above you, an authority figure. And so fusion with thoughts. This is something you might try laying this out for yourself. This is just one way of processing through things, and I like to process in writing. I think that's helpful. I encourage a lot of journaling and self-reflective writing in my and my therapy practice. And so, possible fusion with thoughts that could occur here would be like, what's he gonna say about me? Or what's my boss going to say about me? What will what will they say? Right? That could be a fearful thought. If you're watching this, you might think, what would be some of your thoughts be that would hook you in? I'll draw a little hook over here. Okay. What would be the kinds of messages in your mind showing up? Like, what's he going to say about me? What's she going to say about me? What kind of problems will they find? What would be another example of getting fused here? Criticism from a boss. Let's see. Yeah. Will I not get a bonus? Will I not get a bonus? Or maybe maybe it's something visceral. This will be awful. This is terrible. This is the worst. The worst. Okay, so it might be some more vague kind of thoughts of just dread or doom, just bad thing. I don't know what it's going to be. It's just going to be bad. I just know it's going to be bad. I just don't like it. Okay. I focused on thoughts here. There could be, I put experiences to diffuse from. There could be anxiety, fear, dread. I mean, these things all go together. There could be physical symptoms, tension. Maybe as you think about it, your heart rate goes up. Heart rate goes up. Okay, maybe you get sweaty. Okay, and self-conscious. Now you're thinking about yourself, and that's like the last thing you need is to feel anxious, and you're thinking about yourself and worrying all the more about what kind of feedback you're going to get, and then that becomes just a loop. Like, I'm thinking about myself, what I'm experiencing myself is bad, I'm anxious, I'm scared, I'm feeling tense. That's all signaling danger in my body. I don't like that. So I'm even more self-conscious about that. I mean, we've got the potential for a panic attack to develop with these kind of symptoms going on. Okay. And then, okay, so that's the fusion piece. So our two problems, according to acceptance and commitment therapy, are cognitive fusion. I'm getting hooked. I'm getting wrapped up in some sort of inner experience. And then experiential control. That's number two. Is now I'm trying to respond to that. I'm trying to cope. I'm trying to do my best with this thing. It's some way that I've learned, some way that I've developed to respond to this, to try to take control of my inner world here. And it could be a good thing. It could be workable. It could be not workable. It could have been helpful in the past, but it's not working so much now. An experiential control strategy in this situation let's say, is going to be, this is a common one, think about it more. Think about it more. Okay, ruminate. Let me just roll that around in my head even more. Let me worry about this more. I'm feeling worried. I'm feeling anxious. I don't know what's going to happen. I've got this uncertainty and this dread. Maybe if I think about this more, that'll help. Let me just dig in there. I can't help it. It's just happening. I can't help but think about this more. Okay? I can't help this. I can't stop this. I can't stop thinking about it. That would be some more fusion thoughts here. I can't stop. I can't stop worrying would be another example of fusion in that very thought. Okay, part of fusion is believing thoughts to be true. I think it, it must be true. My mind says I can't stop worrying. It said I can't stop worrying. My mind is me, right? I guess I can't stop worrying. I just took it as the truth. Okay, so I'm trying to stop worrying. How do I try to stop worrying? Let me think about it more. Does that work? What's another one? Let's say, let me think about like every bad thing that could happen. So, let's say future fears, future planning. I don't know how you want to call that. That could be catastrophizing. That may be a better term for it. But really laying out, going down those rabbit holes of, well, this bad thing could happen, or this bad thing could happen, this bad thing could happen. Okay, so then the strategy there is the experiential control. Your mind is giving you as well. If you just plan out every bad thing that could happen to you, you'll feel more prepared. If you just dwell on every bad risk that could happen here, every crappy thing your boss could say to you, every criticism they can find, and you worry about every single one of those and think through it, then you will be more equipped in the moment of time when that comes to withstand whatever criticism is coming at you. Does that make you feel better? Do you feel more relaxed after doing that? Is this hitting home for anyone? Okay, so there's our fusion. There's our experiential control. Those are our problems according to ACT. And then, okay, they've got some short-term benefits. And so maybe you as the viewer, I want you to think about, like, what would the short-term benefits of these strategies be here? What's the benefit of going down that think about it more path? What's the benefit of trying to plan out the future by thinking of every bad thing that could happen? What's the benefit of just staying stuck on it, of believing every thought that comes along? Okay? I'll let you think about that for a moment. You might chew on this. And then I'll have some ideas on this. So it all comes down to like survival, basically. That's a big theme in psychology and counseling. So, okay. I've already hit on this, but if I could plan out the future, maybe I'm better equipped. So maybe there's this belief that I'm better equipped by doing this. I'll know the bad things that will happen. Maybe the short-term benefit is that maybe it feels like doing something. Feels like something. At least my mind is doing something with this. At least I'm looking at the danger. It's like danger is coming. The train is coming at me and I'm standing on the railroad track. If there's nothing else I can do, I can at least look at it that it's coming. The criticism is coming. I better just look at it. So there's some sense of maybe control with that, to focus on the danger, to focus on the feared thing. Let's see, what else? To get hooked on that. Well, maybe the value of getting hooked and just dwelling on it is maybe I don't miss something. I don't miss out. I don't miss some key piece of information. Some of the things our minds tell us are true and valuable. Our minds are problem-solving, thinking machines, like amazing computers, and so some of the thoughts that we have certainly can be true and valuable thoughts. So then the assumption becomes, well, then like every thought is a true and valuable thought. I should believe everything that comes to my mind. So maybe I should make a video on assumptions that we make. But then that becomes something unhelpful to us. But we'll give the devil its due. The mind thinks that it'll be helpful. This will be helpful. I better do this. And it becomes just so automatic that you're just automatically doing this. You don't have to think about getting fused. You don't have to think about your experiential control strategy. These are just the ways that you're naturally responding to things. These are things that you learn. And I want you to think about what the long-term cost about these things are. And this is part of what we do in therapy. Okay. So what happens to me when I go down this path? What is the cost of this in the long run? What is this doing to my life when I get caught up justifying this process? When I get caught up in that believing me I can't stop this? When I get caught up in believing these awful things are going to happen and I better think about every one of them? What does that do for me in the long run? How is that actually affecting me? Is it causing me to feel more equipped? Is it causing me to feel more courageous? Is it causing me to feel more prepared for the scary, intimidating, anxiety-provoking situations? Am I feeling like a more confident and more flexible human being? Or is it causing me, paradoxically, maybe more stress? And there's a lot of ways you could tease that out, but I don't have enough room on my whiteboard to do that. More stress. So I want you to think about, and we would tease that out in more detail in session and through homework, what that stress would be. Okay, and so we've got experiences to defuse from: the anxiety, fear, the dread, the tension, the heart rate going up, the sweatiness, the self-consciousness, and the thoughts, and all of these thoughts up here, these automatic thoughts that are just coming in and you're getting hooked on. These are all things that we want to get space from. Now the problem with going at that directly is, if my stance is, how do I get rid of that? How do I get rid of this? How do I fix this? My internal experiences is a problem. I want to get rid of it. That stance couldn't be farther from the stance of acceptance. I'm in this mode of I'm trying to push this away. One of the metaphors in ACT is the sense of this ball being underwater. You're trying to have a big ball full of air, okay, a rubber ball, and you're in a pool and try to push that ball underwater, and you're trying to push it down, and all that ball wants to do is come back up. And so that's your fusion and experiential control happening. And so if your stance going into ACT and using the tools of ACT and using these mindfulness strategies and things is still, how do I push the ball down under the water? How do I get rid of the fear and the anxiety and the unpleasant feelings of the tension in your body and the unpleasant thoughts that are showing up? I'm going to use these new tools to get rid of this. And you're still pushing that ball under the water. You're still trying to get rid of something. You don't want it to be there. And your mind knows. The mind knows you don't want it to be there. Like, you're not going to trick yourself from this thing. You're not going to be able to go, not really. I'm totally okay with it being there when I'm not. Your mind knows. If your stance is, I want this to get the heck out of here, your mind's going to know that, and you're still in this battle. So that's like the crux of how do I implement ACT and actually do this in my life? Because it's a experiential kind of thing. It's a doing kind of thing. You can read books on it. You can watch this video on it, many videos on it, whatever, but you actually have to practice it. You actually have to do it and work on getting better at it experientially. And so, okay. So we've got these tools here I'm going to talk about. This stance has to be this roundabout kind of way. That if I work on using these things that I'm going to explain, it's kind of a happy accident if I also happen to feel better. But my goal is not to feel better, because if my goal is to feel better, that means my goal is to stop feeling bad. And so my goal has to actually be allow myself to have the unpleasant stuff. I'm going to allow it to be there. I'm going to make room for it to be there. And so this first tool that I named here, this is a diffusion tool. Okay, so we're here. Okay, so now the stance I just laid out is here. Okay, that's the acceptance stance. Open up to that present, to the uncomfortable and unwanted things that are showing up in the present, opening up to it. And then we're moving here, diffusion, cognitive diffusion. So I'm moving us here now. And one of the tools, a basic tool to that, is to notice and name what is showing up. If it's a thought, going, I notice the thought. Instead of going, I can't stop worrying about this, I go, I notice the thought of, I can't stop worrying about this. I notice the thought of not being able to stop this. I notice the thought of worrying what my boss will say. I notice the thought of not getting the bonus. Or you could make it as thinking. There's my mind thinking. It's doing that thinking thing again. You might name the process. There's my mind worrying again. There's the worrier. That's worry showing up. And so we're noticing and naming the process that is unfolding. Instead of getting caught up with what the content of these words are, diffusion is to name what is actually happening here. It's not, oh, this dangerous thought. It's, my mind is having a thought. My mind can have that thought. I'm just going to notice that it's having that thought. I'm just going to name that that's a thought. We can use that over here for the anxiety, the fear, and dread. I notice the feeling of dread showing up in my body. I notice the feeling of fear showing up in my body, or anxiety showing up. And I'm going to allow that to be there right now. I notice that my heart is racing, or rather, I notice the feeling of my heart racing, or the heart racing inside of my body. The more you use that language to create some distance, the better. I notice there's feelings of tension showing up right now. I am noticing and naming that. I'm noticing thoughts of self-consciousness showing up. Okay, I'm noticing and naming it. That's a diffusion skill. I'm just trying to unhook for a moment. I've been caught up in this thing. I want to unhook from that thing just to get some distance from it. All kinds of experiences happen to us that we don't take in, that we don't care about, our mind doesn't experience danger about, and so we don't even notice these things. And I mean, we have 5 senses and they're taking things in all the time. Our minds are always thinking of thoughts like all the time, and yet most of them we don't even necessarily have to tune into. And so what we want to do with the dangerous stuff showing up is treat it more like dispassionately, more like the things that don't matter and that we don't get hooked on. So that's what we're doing here. Now, observe. Okay, I'm going into self as context, or this observing stance. And so rather than being in the content of the self, which is what am I thinking about myself, self as content, what am I thinking about myself? I'm worried about what my boss is going to say. I'm worried that he or she will have bad things to say about me, criticisms to say about me, and what might those things be, and what might those things mean. That would be the content, and my value is getting caught up in the content, and that place of that content here is not where I want to stay. I want to get into what that context is, and the context is the here and now. I want to observe the here and now. I want to take a step back. I like to use the imagery from the Men in Black movie, where there's the alien guy and his head opens up and he's got the little alien inside of him looking around. And so with the observing self, the self as your context, the context of the here and now, is the goal is to take this stance of being a curious observer. There's a me in here that can realize, oh my goodness, I'm looking out from my eyeballs. They're like cameras. I've got ears. They're like microphones. So I've got these sensory things, and I'm just experiencing. I might be getting curious about experiencing the world around me. I might be getting curious about what's going on in my body. And so instead of going, oh my gosh, my heart is racing and that feels terrible, I'm going, oh, that's interesting. I noticed that. I noticed that my heart is racing right now. Well, that's interesting. Wonder what that means. And I'm not going to go down that path of what might that mean. I'm just being curious about that stance, right? Because I don't want to get rehooked and refused with a question of what does that mean. It could be a useful question for processing, but in this regard, just going to go like, well, that's interesting kind of stance and repeat that. Okay, so I'm taking a curious observer stance. It's like if I were looking in through a microscope, I'm looking at something and studying it. And so I'm doing that with my body and what's going up right now in this moment. Okay, so I name it and notice it. This is what's showing up, and that's interesting. That's okay. I'm taking away the danger aspect of that. And then the present moment here. I wrote here, push feet into the floor. There's a lot of different ways you can connect with the present moment. But at this point, then I want to go here. How do I more physically connect with what's happening right here in the here and now? My 5 senses. I can press my feet into the floor. I can notice a breath. I can hold the armrest. These things are real. They're happening right now. These things are separate from the danger that I'm going down the path of worrying. Because that represents something. It's not even happening right now in the moment. It's not even happening in the here and now. What's happening right now is what's real. And so I want to physically connect with that visceral way. And then from there, I've gotten even more distance. And that distance, not distracting and not running away from. Rather, the distance I'm getting is a distance where I'm getting out of my head into what's happening really right now. And that is more real than whatever was going on inside my head. And then the values. How do I want to show up in this moment? Who do I want to be in this moment? Okay, so something scary is going to happen. I'm going to get criticism from my boss. That's our theme here. So how do I want to show up to that? What kind of person do I want to be? How do I want to show up when danger is approaching? How do I want to show up? As far as receiving criticism from someone, criticism from someone who's a superior. How do I want to be in response to that? Do I want to cower? Do I want to be afraid? Do I want to be the kind of person that's all wrapped up in it and sees this as a terrible thing? So what matters to you in that moment? What matters to me in that moment? How do I want to show up to this kind of thing? So rather, do I want to show up with courage? Do I want to rather show up maybe in an unoffendable way? I'm here to accept whatever that criticism is, or at least open up to the idea of what those things may be, because maybe there's criticism that aren't valid there. That maybe there are things that need to be challenged or examined. But do I want to be open to, okay, I can be the kind of person who can take some criticism. I can be the kind of person who doesn't collapse and break in response to being told this is something that's wrong with you. This is something that you've done wrong, and I don't have to take that as a shattering of my whole personhood. Yes, there are flaws. There are things wrong with me. There are things that I am less than perfect at, and I'm willing and ready and open to receive that. Right? Is that the kind of stance you want to take instead of I need to be seen as perfect, or oh no, what if they see the flaws? That's going to ruin me. I can't stand that. Or maybe an offensive or an offended kind of stance of well, the heck with them, like there's nobody better than me, and if they've got a problem with it, then they can take a hike, or I don't know. I mean, you can imagine what an offendable kind of stance could be. And then the final piece here, commit to action. Commit to action. And so this is where we write, think about what is the tangible next step? What am I going to do with this? Okay. Maybe I do need to sit down and write about, or sit with somebody else and talk about what those fears may be. Maybe it would be useful to take some time to talk through this. Give the devil its due and give this worry some worry time. And maybe that would be useful. Maybe you've given enough of it, and that's beyond the point of helping anymore. Maybe you spend enough time worrying about this thing and you desire to move on. What's going to happen is going to happen. And so maybe the action step that you want to take is you're going to practice some of these skills here, and then you're going to make some time for you. Or maybe you're going to reflect on some things that could be criticisms and some things that are your strengths, and you're going to come into it ready to accept things and maybe even be able to voice things you noticed about yourself while also being able to point out those good things and know that you have good qualities. Maybe it taking some time to reflect on that your value is not based on this job or on these criticisms, and that you are so much more and so much more valuable than any particular flaw, any particular criticism or critique, or more than your job or things like that. And maybe you spend too much time worrying about this and you want to connect with your family or with a hobby that you enjoy, something like that. Okay, so what's the action step that you want to take there, so that rather than just staying in this place of worry and rumination, you're going to go do something. Maybe it's do something about it. Maybe it's do something where you're just stepping away from this thing entirely. Maybe the do something you're going to do is going to be to work this out just as we did. Maybe that's the thing that you realize, you know what, maybe it would be helpful to work this out in detail and give some time to think through this and connect with what are the tools that I need to take to this thing. So, okay, that was values and then committed action. And so I've just worked with you the steps of, at least in a written sort of way, and we might do a thing like this in session, me and my clients, in various ways. I don't always map things out on the board like this, but you can do this in journaling and writing, and sometimes I'll map it out in ways like this. This is an example of how to apply the tools going on with ACT and the stances going on with ACT, these concepts. So I hope that this was helpful for you. If you stuck around for 36 minutes, I appreciate it. And I'll probably do more videos like this. And if you've got ideas for examples of how you'd like to see me applying ACT and working through how ACT can apply to a problem you're dealing with in your life, hey, maybe that would be useful for future videos. So leave me a comment. And if you like these kind of things, please give me a comment, like, and subscribe. And if you don't, then that's okay too. Yeah, I can take some criticism as well. Hey, that'll sharpen the iron. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.